Hello everyone, welcome to Diplomatic Review. Recently, India has been facing setbacks, having had military conflicts with Pakistan, resulting in at least 5 advanced fighter jets being shot down. Since Pakistan primarily uses advanced Chinese weapons, military experts worldwide view this as a contest between Chinese and Western advanced weaponry. Regardless of India's stance, it is seen as the big loser in this global military hotspot. Despite recent thaw in Sino-Indian relations, India still engages in several minor disruptive actions in cooperation with the United States. China mainly focuses on creating artificial barriers in bilateral trade. While China is trying to expand its circle of friends amid the ongoing trade war with the United States, it will decisively retaliate against third countries that align with the US pace when necessary. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce has decided that starting from May 7, 2025, anti-dumping measures will be implemented on imported green pyrethrum originating from India, with anti-dumping duties ranging from 48.4% to 166.2%. Green pyrethrum is a type of pesticide used for pest control in cotton, fruit trees, vegetables, tobacco, corn, and flowers. India is the world's largest producer and exporter of green pyrethrum. Its export volume is more than 8 times that of the world's second largest exporting country. It has a clear market advantage. A commentary from a subsidiary of CCTV further analyzed the situation, pointing out that China's actions are meant to send 2 signals to the outside world. The first is that in response to the unfair trade practices of certain countries, the Chinese government must take appropriate measures to protect domestic industry interests. The second is that in the context of the broader Sino-US economic and trade struggle, at this critical moment of global response to US tariffs, China will not allow other countries to use harming China's interests as a bargaining chip. Such actions will inevitably face countermeasures from China. China's dissatisfaction with these actions will be directly reflected in practical actions. The article from the commentary lists detailed examples. Data shows that India's dumping practices are particularly evident and severe, and Indian companies are not cooperating with investigations. In response, the Ministry of Commerce has repeatedly provided opportunities for extensions and explanations, but Indian companies have not accepted them. Another major context is the global response to US tariffs. Currently, countries are at a critical moment in tariff negotiations with the United States, and they are accumulating leverage to secure more favorable negotiating terms. In the US tariff calculation system, there are differences in the priority order of imposing tariffs on different countries. This provides some countries with the opportunity to leverage the interests of other nations in exchanges with the United States. For instance, on April 21st, before the final decision, India announced a 12% provisional tariff on certain imported steel, with China being the main target, involving approximately $1.06 billion. On that day, US Vice President Pence began his visit to India. Many analysts pointed out that India's bold move was likely to align with the US in countering China. It is noteworthy that other Asian countries with a high trade surplus with the US have been cautious. When negotiating with the US, they aim to avoid affecting other international agreements or disrupting other markets. As for India, so far it has not made any public statements. To put it bluntly, while other countries have stated they will not trade China's interests for deals with the US, India has not made any public declarations. During the visit, it was also mentioned that US-India security cooperation remains strong. This year's Quad Security Dialogue shows that the topics currently being discussed between the US and India are not limited to tariffs, and the US's intention to have India take a clear stance in other areas is becoming more apparent. An article from Yuan suggests that these unusual signs inevitably lead to suspicion that certain countries might be submitting a pledge of allegiance by harming China's interests. The article points out that China's announcement of the final ruling against India is mainly to serve as a warning through this case, which is not complicated. What is noteworthy is the manner in which China chose to act. In the face of fierce competition, many chemical companies opt to lower prices to gain a competitive edge when entering foreign markets. Thus, anti-dumping has become a common trade remedy against such practices. The author points out that in recent years, India has increasingly engaged in irregular and unfriendly actions in bilateral trade with China, not only through various tariffs and non-tariff barriers, but also by hindering the balanced development of Sino-Indian bilateral trade. They have repeatedly suppressed Chinese enterprises through improper means. Since the beginning of this year, India has already launched 7 anti-dumping investigations against Chinese products. However, many of these investigations lack evidence and are aimed at disrupting the operations of Chinese enterprises. Professor Shi Xiaoli from the School of International Studies at China University of Political Science and Law cited data released by the World Trade Organization. India ranks only 9th in terms of import volume, yet it has long been the country that initiates the most anti-dumping cases worldwide. In these investigations, less than 50% conclude successfully, with confirmation of dumping behavior and the implementation of anti-dumping measures. This suggests a strong suspicion that India is abusing anti-dumping investigations. When facing investigations from India, China has 2 ways to handle it. One is to communicate, and the other is to directly take reciprocal measures to counteract. In recent years, China's attitude towards India has consistently been to strengthen communication and consultation, reduce unnecessary trade remedies and restrictive measures, and resolve issues arising in trade cooperation through dialogue and negotiation. By 2025, aside from India's frequent and aggressive anti-dumping investigations against China, following the unilateral global trade war initiated by the United States, there have been even more minor provocations. In early April, many countries criticized the US for its indiscriminate imposition of tariffs. While other countries were opposing and expressing anger, what did India do? India claimed to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, viewing the global trade chaos as a chance to boost its manufacturing development. As a result, India not only refrained from retaliating against US tariffs, but also frequently made concessions, hoping to quickly reach a trade agreement with the United States. Relevant analyses have pointed out, in recent years, India has reached bilateral free trade agreements with developed economies such as Europe and Japan, often taking advantage of the chaos to gain benefits and create momentum. The article concludes by stating that China has consistently sought to resolve issues through peaceful dialogue. However, if the other party insists on provocation or harming China's interest, China will not hesitate to take strong measures to resolutely safeguard its own rights and interests. Taking countermeasures against India this time is to let India know not to persist in its wrong ways. And for those countries observing with similar intentions, this is also a clear signal that if they intend to use China's interest as a bargaining chip to exchange with the United States, China will absolutely not agree and will definitely take action to counteract. To summarize simply, for a period of time, China has adhered to the principle of valuing peace and coexisting peacefully. However, when Trump launched a frenzied tariff war against China, China had no choice but to fight back. When Trump attempted to rally allies to encircle China, China also had to set an example by taking concrete actions to warn other countries not to oppose China. Any measures taken to cooperate with the US in pressuring China will face countermeasures, so don't underestimate. The anti-dumping duties on Indian pesticides, reflect major powers' strategies. Meanwhile, some countries that previously closely followed the US in its anti-China stance have also begun to reconsider, as CBC reported on May 6th. During the meeting between Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and US President Donald Trump, Canada is facing numerous challenges. Not only does it have to deal with the threat of US tariffs, but it also needs to manage its relationship with the world's second-largest economy, China. In response, some Canadian scholars have called on the ruling Liberal government to remove tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, to promote trade with China and achieve climate goals. Additionally, experts suggest that Canada should collaborate with China in the development of electric vehicles. Last fall, despite opposition and advice from various parties, the Trudeau government in Canada followed the then Biden administration's approach by imposing tariffs on Chinese electric vehicle steel and aluminum products, with the tax rates exactly matching those of the United States. In March this year, China announced retaliatory tariffs on imports such as canola oil originating from Canada. Critics argue that with the deterioration of US-Canada relations, the pressing climate goals, and China's counter-tariffs on Canada, the tariff policy towards China is becoming increasingly untimely. Jessica Green, a political science professor at the University of Toronto who studies climate change, pointed out that this is a foolish policy. At that time, we were merely following suit to show loyalty to the United States. The situation has changed, making this policy appear even more foolish. Petrunik, the CEO of the Canadian Urban Transit Research and Innovation Consortium, criticized that Canada lost its ability to think independently last year. There is a mental inertia in our trade policy, always assuming that being close means having a reliable partner. The trade protectionism policies implemented by the Trump administration and its aggressive rhetoric towards Canada have provoked voters. The backlash, a kind of public opinion backlash, directly helped the current Prime Minister Carney lead the Liberal Party to win the election. Analysts believe that if the tension in US-Canada relations continues, the new Canadian government may gain more political space to advance cooperation with China, as Canadian public resistance to US policies deepens, especially when dealing with matters related to China. The policy coherence between the US and Canada may significantly decline. Canada might adopt a more independent foreign policy strategy. The conclusion is that continuing to follow the US poses the greatest danger to countries worldwide, while China has always been a stabilizing force.